I Am Not a Serial Killer is a quirky indie horror thriller about a 16-year-old high schooler named John who is not a serial killer yet, but he fears becoming one as he has been clinically diagnosed as a sociopath and therefore suffers homicidal impulses. So in order to keep them along with his morbid obsessions with death and serial killers in check, he has to follow a series of rules because he is afraid he might eventually hurt someone if he isn't careful. To make matters more morbid, he works in his mother's mortuary where he has access to dead bodies that he helps embalm along with his mother, aunt, and sister. Hey, it's a family business. When a real serial killer begins terrorizing his small and quiet Midwestern town, he takes an increased interest in the killings when discovering that certain body parts have been removed from each body. Sometimes a kidney, sometimes a liver, sometimes a lung, a leg, an arm, what have you. He begins suspecting his elderly neighbor Bill to be committing the crimes. More paranormal things will prove to be at play, so using his experience and knowledge as a sociopath, he will begin to investigate and try to figure out just what the hell is going on. Coincidentally, this is the third film in the row I'm reviewing that's about presenting us with a certain type of psychopath or sociopath and presenting them to be much more human than we usually get to see in film and much more human than we usually like to think of or consider them to be. I reviewed Hounds of Love, which is a very brutal film about some very vicious and ruthless and merciless killers. I reviewed Berlin Syndrome, which is not such a brutal film. It's actually more about the codependency and the very nurturing relationship that can emerge between a captor and a captive. And then we have this movie in which the main character, John, is, 100% good guy. He is no anti-hero, he is not a villain, and his story is much more of a coming-of-age story. It's much more about maturing. It's no wonder that the novel the film is based on has actually been considered in the UK to be more of a young adult horror story. In Germany it has been considered to be more of an adult thriller, and in the US it has actually been marketed to both audiences. So it's pretty varied, and yeah, it's kind of semi-young adult, semi-coming-of-age story. John actually does have to face some of the problems, very typical problems that usually very socially awkward teenagers are faced with, which include having had to grow up with an absent father. He has a very loving mother who nevertheless can get a little bit too overprotective sometimes and can really get on his nerves every now and then. He is bullied in school and he doesn't know how to talk to girls. But the interesting thing is that all of these situations are turned on their head because about being bullied, he has no fear and he really knows how to bully back. One of the most memorable and funny scenes in the film actually take place at a Halloween party where a bully comes up to John and says to him, "Look, this party is for normal people, you should just go home to your slut of a mother." And this completely backfires for the bully because John just has the perfect comeback imaginable. He says that, "Hey, did you know that I've been clinically diagnosed as a sociopath? Which means that to me, you are nothing more than just a simple object. You're like a cardboard box." And the interesting thing about cardboard boxes is that they might seem to be like very boring things on the outside, but when you cut them open every now and then you might find something interesting on the inside, and it really makes me think about cutting you open right now. So that's like really scares the bully, and John has basically threatened to kill him actually. And about girls, it's actually not him who likes a girl because obviously he has no empathy. It's actually a girl who likes him, who obviously has butterflies in her stomach for him, and he is just not responding to her. He is not either not noticing her or her advances, or is just not interested in it because he just doesn't understand affection or love. He also has a friend, his only friend, so his best friend by default actually, to whom he says at one point that, "I'm only hanging out with you because we can do normal stuff and it makes me feel normal." And telling someone that you're only hanging out with them because it makes you feel normal and it keeps you from killing other people is quite a fucking distressing thing to say. So, all these problems he is faced with, but, for us, for normal people, it would seem like to be pretty major. For him, it seemed like they are more like minor inconveniences rather than struggles. So the film is basically showing you kind of the positive side of being a sociopath. So yeah, you might be missing out on certain aspects of life, but at the same time, you're a lot more in control of yourself. You're a lot more in control of your emotions because you barely even have any. So John is a very nice kid. He is very intelligent and you root for him and he understands and he is conscious of the danger his condition poses. And even though he lacks feeling any empathy or guilt or shame, he realizes that he has to keep himself as under control as possible. Which is why he is seeing a therapist. And this situation as well is also kind of turned on its head when compared to other films of this nature because John and and his therapist are really on very good terms. They're almost like friends. John is constantly asking him for advice. They have a lot of very interesting conversations. Once they talk about the McDonald triad or the homicidal triad, which is a combination of three characteristics that they say is inherent in most serial killers. The three characteristics are persistent bedwetting after a certain age, pyromania, and animal cruelty. And John says something very interesting. He says that he never even thought that animal cruelty could predict violent behavior until he read about it. And this really got me thinking that, wow, I never thought of it that way. I always thought that murderers knew exactly that what they are doing is wrong, but they just felt the uncontrollable urge to do it. I never thought that maybe, hey, murderers don't even realize that what they are doing is wrong, and the only thing they realize is that it's forbidden, it's against the law. For a murderer, killing people is like how for a stoner it is to smoke marijuana. You know, it's forbidden, but I like it, so I do it. And no, killing people is not like marijuana. It's very interesting. During another conversation, John is talking about fear, and he says that fear is very interesting because people are always afraid of certain things happening, but they are never afraid of their own actions. And he is looking at a woman who is crossing the street, and he says that she might be scared about getting hit by a car, but she is definitely not scared about crossing the street. You know, it's very interesting. It's probably how the mind of a sociopath works. They probably might not be scared of letting himself commit to his violent urges. The only thing he might be scared of is being caught and being forbidden of ever doing it again. So it might not be so different from smoking pot after all. And this film, despite being about fear and death and killing and violent urges, is actually pretty lighthearted. There's a lot of banter between characters. There's a scene in which, for example, John is following and spying on his neighbor Bill, who is out with his wife in a restaurant, and there he actually bumps into his mother, who is out on a date with his therapist. So awkward. And on the way home in the car, his therapist, in an attempt to lighten the mood, actually says that, hey John, you did pretty good tonight because you were obviously there in the restaurant because you were concerned about your mother, since there is a serial killer in town. And obviously John's response is, do you actually think that I was there because I was concerned about my mother? Get real. And his therapist is like, God damn it, John. I mean, I realize that you don't have any empathy, but you should really recognize a lifeline when you get one. And that's the way the whole film is constructed, basically. You have these very short scenes. Every single one reveals some new information. They're all connected. Like, there's always one thing leading to the other. Like, for the very first time John actually witnesses his neighbor Bill murdering someone, he was actually following another guy around and not Bill. So it was quite a surprise, both for him as well as for us, the audience members. And speaking of Bill, played by Christopher Lloyd, man, what can I say? This is an excellent actor, and this is an excellent performance. This is a character who's very mysterious, very frail. He is a very old man. He is very quiet, but he is also, when he speaks, he says a lot, and he is very wise. One of my favorite scenes in the film is when John goes visiting Bill. He does this several times in the movie, and he recites two poems from William Blake, the Lamb and the Tiger. And he says that one is made out of sweetness and love, obviously being the lamb, and the other is forged from terror and death, obviously being the tiger. And this really got me thinking. I really think this is the film that kind of talks about destiny, I think, in a way. And is anyone truly destined to become a serial killer? Is any psychopath or sociopath actually truly destined to become a murderer? And I think the answer the film gives is definitely no, and I think that's how it is in real life as well. No, nobody is destined to become a murderer. People choose to. And it's really interesting because we do actually eventually find out why he is killing people, and I'm not going to spoil it for you if you haven't seen the movie and you're interested in watching it. It's very interesting because when you find out, you kind of start empathizing with him a little bit, and it makes sense because the film kind of cheats in a way. We never truly get to see the people he is killing close. We never truly get to know them or get to find out anything about them, so we don't really empathize with him. Therefore, we empathize with him, and the reason he is killing is also kind of sort of semi-altruistic, but also pretty much very semi-egoistic as well. So it's it's pretty interesting. So that will be my 2 cents on this film, folks. I think it's a very good indie film. I've seen it twice already, so I'm a fan. If you're looking for something incredibly profound or deep or gory or scary, even though the film does get somewhat gruesome and a little bit over the top in the end, still it doesn't compare to any like cliche horror movie out there. It functions much more as this kind of quirky indie film horror thriller combination with a very quirky edge. So if you're looking for something like that, I definitely recommend it. It has a very like vintage look. It's shot on 16mm film, so it has this very like sort of 70s look to it. So that will be it, folks. Thanks for watching my review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so I can see you later with other reviews. And until then, folks, you know the drill. As always, stay cool, stay awesome, and goodbye.